right, and welcome back to another episode of Butler's Babble, where we aim to empower, motivate, and inspire you to live the best life that you can do. And we do that by, of course, bringing in different guests every interview here that have went through something that they've been able to work their way through, and now they want to share their stories with you. So hopefully you're watching this and you're going to learn something from this and take back with you whatever you can. Just a reminder that if you are watching this on YouTube, don't be afraid to subscribe and give us a like on there. And if you're listening to this on audio versions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is, again, don't be afraid to give us a like and give us some comments on what you're liking. And if you have any questions, feel free to send them. I'm sure we can answer them as soon as we get a chance. Today's guest we've got coming to us all the way from Nebraska, and her story is one that's not like many others, as she's went through a couple different traumas in her life that she wants to share with you. So we're going to bring her right in instead of listening to me go on, and we're going to bring in our special guest, Tabatha Thorell. Tabatha, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming. So everybody knows a little bit about you. Why don't you give us a little history on Tabatha and where Tabatha grew up and what you were like as a little child?
Yeah. So like you said, I grew up in Nebraska. That's where we currently live. I grew up in a small rural town about 7 miles from where I currently live because I married my high school sweetheart, and this is his hometown. And so that's where we live today. But take you guys back to where I grew up. And when I was younger, I was the youngest of 5 siblings. My parents were extremely hard workers. My dad, I remember him working honestly, sometimes it was like 90-hour weeks. It was crazy. And he had a blue collar job. And so he wasn't around a whole lot. But for me, like my childhood, it has little bits of like amazing, awesome. I think I had the best childhood. And then when people ask me to share my story, I'm like, oh, well, I guess it did have this and this and this, and that's probably not very normal. But I was, I was very high energy and I talked a lot. Shocking. You guys are going to know, like, I like to talk. And when I was younger, I always got that. I remember even in kindergarten, I would sing songs or talk to myself. And I think they even had like a recording of me singing like Old MacDonald, like in the corner, back when cassette, you'd record it on a little cassette thing. I love to perform. I love to make people laugh. I love just interacting, high energy. And that was great. But like some adults don't like that. And so they tell you when you're younger, like, hey, you're too loud, you're too wiggly. Like I grew up in a Catholic church. Like, you sit down, be quiet, like you're moving too much. And I couldn't sit through the service. It was just too much for me. And so you hear those things when you're younger, and they plant seeds. And I remember feeling very insecure about those things. And because of stuff that I'll go into a little bit later, when I hit kind of that like 5th, 6th grade, that prepubescent, like I put on some weight, like I was chunky. And in my head, I was fat, I was obese, I was this, and I wouldn't say bullied, but I was definitely teased. And I was even teased by close family members. And so when you get teased about your weight as a female, when you're younger, that plants a deep seed. And so just having that kind of like insecurity, but still like, I still loved life and I had a lot of energy. So it's like you had these conflicting things because I felt inadequate. I felt insecure, but I still loved to be like the life of the party and wanting to perform. And so you have that. And then you come into like adolescenthood and, even in high school and stuff. And it brings this weird kind of conundrum because I'd still like, I had a lot of friends. I really did. And I had a great social circle, but like, I still like felt inadequate. But I was in sports, even in my chunky, fat, whatever, like, I kind of ran the elementary track. I was the last one. I have a horrible picture of me, but like, I still did the things because I desired for that connection. My friends were in those activities. And when I was in high school, I really found my way as far as like exercise, and like, I was in more sports and I dropped the baby weight, and like, I really became, I loved what like fitness and exercising did for me, even like lifting weights. And I became a lot of like self-determined because I was never the first pick. I was never like on varsity or starting. I always had to climb my way and like work extra hard. Like I was always the one doing extra sprints or extra jumps in volleyball, going out and doing extra things for track. Like those were I always had to do that to even just get a little bit of head. And so when I was in it, it was
Mm-hmm.
really hard. Like I hated it. I was like, why can't I just be skinny? Why can't I just be fast? Why can't, we just want that
Yep.
instant. But now I look back and think, man, those were such good characteristics that I built up younger because they
Mm-hmm.
served me so much today. And so like I said, I met my husband when I was 15. I'm the same talky talk like energy, and he's more reserved, more quiet. And I kind of bring that out in him. And, we just fell in love. And before I even dated him, this is just a funny like side note. People who know us know the story, but I told one of his best friends, I'm like, if he would just date me, we will get married someday.
That's awesome.
And I was 15, but I was
Yeah.
dead serious. I was dead serious. And I say this seriously. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was like put in my spirit. Like you gotta find, because he was quiet and he was shy and he
Yep.
never would call me. And I'm always like calling him, that's when the landlines had. And
Sure.
and I'm like, if he would just date me. And then he says he finally came to his senses and came to one of my volleyball games, and the rest is history. So
Exactly. I know what you mean, because they say opposites attract. And my wife and I are kind of the same way. We're kind of opposites in a way. Like I'm the chatty one, like you are, whereas she's more reserved. I'm the extrovert. She's the introvert.
yeah,
So a lot of those differences are there, but at the same time, you just know sometimes. Like we were the type that we'd finish each other's sentences and stuff like
yeah.
that. That's when you kind of know. So I know exactly where you're coming from there.
Yes, we have a lot of nonverbal communication because he's very nonverbal, but I
Yep.
always have to tell him like, "Hey, my love language is words of affirmation, so you have to say some words. You have to do."
No, I agree. And
Yeah,
I'm kind of the same, like growing up too, because I grew up with three brothers, an older and two younger, and some of them were more, we all played sports and that, and I loved playing the sports, but I wasn't the top of
yeah,
the line type of sports. We played hockey, of course, being from Canada.
yep,
We were hockey fans. My older brothers were the first line and second liners. I was more the third and fourth liners. It's better if there's a fight going to happen, let me go and do it, because it's easier to put me in the penalty box than one of the other skilled guys, kind of thing. So I
yeah,
know exactly what you're feeling.
yes,
And you do sometimes start to feel almost like you're inadequate. Like, how come they're so fast, or they're so good, or how come they get to be on the first line and do all the power plays, and
yep,
I'm the one that has to sit on the bench all the time? And I've put on some weight a little bit too myself. I mean, I was actually really skinny when I was younger.
yeah,
Instead of, you always felt that you were kind of the chunky one,
yeah,
which probably that was just in your mind. I bet you to everybody else you look fine. But and we all look at that, because I thought I
yeah,
was really skinny, and
right.
now I've got what they call the dad bod, I think. So I don't call it dad bod, I call it a father figure. So
There you go. There you go. Well, and like for me, when I look at like before probably age 8, I was very thin. I mean, like because I was active. I mean, like I said, I was
mhm,
high energy, so I'm outside. And this is back in the 90s and
yeah,
we didn't have cable. We were broke as a joke. So like there was no like that kind of stuff. And so I was outside all the time.
mhm,
And I did put on, I mean, I was, but, and I'll allude to this as I share my story a little bit more, but I did eat a bag of chips and drink soda. And it was a diet thing. It wasn't like I was big bone. It was
mhm,
definitely what I was doing to my body, but I was coping through food. And I
sure,
learned that at a young age, but I also learned what it meant to be fat when I was like 5. And that is
okay,
nothing that a 5-year-old should know what that means. And
mhm,
I think that's why, like, if you have parents that are listening on here, the words that you say, even in passing,
yeah,
even amongst adults, kids hear it. I heard my grandma and my mother talk about being fat like my whole life. My grandma was on a diet her whole entire life. Even when she was 90 in the home, she's like, oh, they're serving us this ice cream again, but like I got to lose a little bit. I'm like, Grandma, you're 90. Like, what's happening?
mhm,
Like it's okay. But and my mom was a stick figure. She was like 120 pounds. Like she was so skinny.
yeah,
But those words were seeds
yeah,
in me growing up. And so there's more to
definitely.
that. But that is kind of in a nutshell me. I'm pretty much the same me I was when I was little, just like, growing up, and more self-confidence, broke some of those limiting beliefs and those things that you don't know you have when you're younger until you're older and you're like, whoa, like what's that? That's not good.
Exactly. No, exactly. And I like you kind of brought it in there too. We're talking about how things you learn as a child put seeds into your brain and that kind of goes on with your story today too,
Yeah.
because a lot of the stuff that happened to you happened when you were young and just like not even 5 years old yet.
Yeah. Very
So what,
impressionable. Very impressionable.
yeah. So why don't we go back to that time and what happened? Because this kind of formed your life for most of your life,
Yeah.
basically.
So to take you guys back, my mom had an autoimmune disease since I was 2 years old. And it was chronic fatigue syndrome. But I mean, in a nutshell, it's an autoimmune disease. So if you know anything about any autoimmune disease, like it affects your immune system. It's like you have the worst cold of your life. Like people can't touch you. It hurts to touch. It hurts to get out of bed. You have headaches, leg cramps, blood clots, like all of these things. And the problem was when this happened in 1987, they didn't know like what it was. And it actually started because she got bit by a tick. It was she had Lyme's disease and it like morphed into this because they didn't stop it. Now they can kind of stop it and treat Lyme's disease differently. But back then they just didn't know. And they didn't even know when she had chronic fatigue syndrome. CFS is what they called it. There was like one specialist in Kansas City that she found in a medical journal reading because she'd been to all these other doctors that were like, you just have the flu. Like you just have this. Like you're fine, just tired. You have 5 kids. Like you're just tired. She's like, no, like I can't get out of bed. And I have 5 kids. Like I would get out of bed if I had, And so they went through a lot of doctors, a lot of money, a lot of things that were really hard. And obviously I was 2, 3, 4 years old. So I don't really know any different. My mom was very nurturing. So I imagine even when she was in that, I was probably laying in bed with her, really close to her. I was always close to her growing up. But as you get older, you recognize, oh, my mom's not playing with me at the park like other moms, or she's not getting out of bed before 10 a.m. or, those little things, or my sibling is helping me get ready in the morning because my mom can't. My husband always jokes because he's like, who got you ready in the morning? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't remember. And he's like, somebody
Exactly.
had to get you ready for kindergarten. And I'm like,
Yep.
well, I'm sure my mom did. I don't remember. We never did like a breakfast thing. She had a really hard time waking up in the morning because she wouldn't sleep well, and he always jokes, he's like, and he'd ask my older sister and she's like, I don't know. I probably did. He's like, you guys just like block out stuff. And I'm like, I guess like if it wasn't good, you just block it out. I don't know. It wasn't like traumatic. I don't think it was just one of those things that, I mean, I'm sure my sisters helped me get ready. I was always dressed like the thing was, is our hair was combed, we always had nice clothes. Even when we were like broke as a joke, like my parents figured out a way, like we were always, it didn't look like we were, if that makes sense. We didn't have
No,
name,
exactly.
yeah, we didn't have name brand stuff, but like we were always putting, my mom was like an avid clearance sales ninja. She could find like the best sales for like 90% off. It was awesome. That was her skill set.
And back then the term layaway was a big thing in my house, because if there was something that was put on layaway.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it was and like I said, my dad worked really hard to provide that life for us, and he pretty much built the house that he lives in today. He built it himself, like no contractors, just him doing a ditch witch on the weekends, which you guys probably don't know what that is, but it's like this machine that like digs out basements. He'd rent it on Friday night so he only had to pay 1 day because he knew he'd get an extra day on Sunday. Like that's how like, savvy, thrifty they would do. And he would dig it up on the weekends during his shifts or whatever. And then, built my mom her dream house that he continually worked on for 30 years. But, like those were the things that we did because we didn't have the money, because we paid a lot in medical bills. Because for some of you, if you know anything about the medical industry, when something's new, which this was at the time, insurance doesn't cover it. And we went to a lot of specialty doctors and those aren't covered in insurance. So then my dad's company like switched insurance companies when I was born. And so they didn't cover my birth, and I was a preemie of 11 weeks. And so they had like $30,000 worth of medical bills that they were still paying on when my mom got sick. So like, it was like this continual mountain of medical bills that my dad was like, I'm going to pay these off. But when I was growing up and I saw my mom sick, I just thought that was like the thing. Like, that's just, this is,
That's all you do,
that's
basically.
all I knew. And I was really close to my mom. Like I slept on her floor. I'd sneak in her bed and like curl up with her and do all these things. Cause like I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know it was wrong. And what I mean by that is I'll never forget, I believe I was about 5 years old. my mom was an avid house cleaner. So like in the moments of the day when she could, be active and up on her feet, she had a very clean house. Our house was always immaculate. And I think it's just because one thing she could control. So and my grandma was a very avid cleaner. So like my mom would get up, she'd vacuum every day, laundry was done every day, dishes, kitchen, immaculate. And she had asked me, "Hey, Tab, you need to pick up your book." I'm like, oh, okay, little kid, like I'll do it later. I'm playing over here. And she was vacuuming, and I look back and she had fallen. Like was on the ground. I didn't know if she fell or whatever. Well, in my brain, my 5-year-old brain, she tripped on my book and she died. Like she's dead. Like, oh my gosh. And I'll never forget, I went and hid behind the couch because I was so scared. I thought I did this. And the ambulance came. Well, what happened is I believe she had a blood clot or like a headache that made her pass out. I know she had a blood clot as well. And they had taken her, away. And I was like, well, at least she's alive, But then I was like, oh, like, did I do this? And then the reality set in that I was going to have to stay with my grandma, the one grandma that I really wasn't that close with. And I didn't really like staying at her house. So then it's this whole, emotion of like, oh, I got to stay with grandma again, And so little things like that would happen. She would go to the hospital frequently for blood clots or migraines, different things that the disease would cause. And so it was kind of the norm for me to go visit her in the hospital. That was just a normal thing. And so I think because of that, like subconsciously, I was always afraid she was going to die. So I would literally sleep on her floor. She had a little couch in her bedroom. When my dad would work late nights, I would sleep on his side of the bed, and he'd sleep on the couch. Like that was just a normal thing, even into high school. And I really do believe that it's because subconsciously, I just didn't know how much time I had with her.
Sure.
And I didn't understand the disease. And then the painkiller she was on, like how that kind of drove her own addiction for that, and not realizing the severity of that when I was younger. It was just the norm. It's like, that's what got her out of bed. But I look back at how many painkillers and what she was on, and I'm like, that'd take down like an elephant. Like my mom was 120 pounds. Holy cow. Like what was going on, And so dissecting that as you get older is a little bit hard, but it was just kind of all I knew. But it was just in of itself traumatic, but I didn't see it that way at the time. Like when you said I went through traumatic events, I still don't see it like that. But looking back, I'm like, but that was trauma a lot of the time.
Now, how did this affect you when it came to being around your friends or going to school, things like that? Like, did it affect your schooling in grades wise? Did it affect your concentration at school, or did it affect even your friends? Because your friends are probably asking questions of what's going on. How come your mom's never around, or why is she always in the hospital?
I think the one thing that helped was that our house was the house to go to. Like my mom was very welcoming, even though she didn't always go and do the things. Like my friends, we had sleepovers constantly. They'd come over after school. We were in town, in a small town, and a lot of my friends lived in the country too. And so like they would come over. So our house was always very welcoming of that. As far as schoolwork, I think it affected me in a way of like when I'd come home and do homework, I just think I did homework by myself. Like my siblings probably helped me a little bit, but it wasn't like they were actively, my dad was very engulfed in work, and my mom was sick. And like, it wasn't like we were reading books every night or doing those things. And that wasn't a normal for me. And so I remember growing up, like in school was always a little bit hard for me in elementary, but then I don't know what the shift was, but like in junior high, well, even in junior high, it was a little bit hard. And I'll never forget when I was a freshman, we had kind of like a little assembly, and they said, if your name is called, come to this assembly. And my name was called, and they said, oh, it's for National Honor Society. And I said, no, it's not, because I'm not on there. Like I never viewed myself as smart. I was like, I don't get good enough grades for that. This has to be for something else. And we get in there and they're like, yes, you're going to be inducted into National Honor Society. And I remember thinking like,
wow,
what? Like I good enough grades for that? Like, okay, I got to read. So apparently I didn't track it because they did and I didn't. But I did notice in the power of that, because of that identity, then I worked really hard in high school and in college. And I was on the dean's list because of that. And before, if I wouldn't have got that, I don't know that I would have. because I never identified myself as the smart kid ever,
Yeah.
ever. And I'm sure there were nuances of that, you know, just being taking care of my mom and doing those types of
Yeah.
things. So, with that, and I will just go into this, I know you're going to allude to this, but
Yeah.
with my mom's illness, that was hard. But again, it was kind of what I knew. So it didn't seem as hard. I have an older sister. I said I was the youngest of five. There's there's three girls and two boys. And I have a middle sister and she's 5 years older than me. And growing up, she was like, you know, like my idol. Like I just loved her. She was beautiful, like the perfect figure. I'm not kidding, like size 2, just like everything illuminating. Everybody wanted to be like her. She had the cool music, the cool clothes, like, you know, everything like that's always the cool boyfriend, everything like that. Well, what I didn't realize, it kind of, when I learned early enough, but about when I was 9, she would have been 14. She got caught being in a hot tub with her boyfriend, you know, being inappropriate, whatever. That was probably the first time that I knew something was like maybe not right, you know, like, okay, like whatever this is, you know, I knew enough to know like that wasn't okay.
Sure.
And I didn't realize at the time that she was drinking at that time, but she kind of started at that time. And I was 9, she was 14, but still, again, my sister, like awesome. I still like wanted to be her and all this stuff. Well, as she got older, junior high, high school, the girls that she surrounded herself were just not a positive environment. Like all of them had an eating disorder. They all drank. They were promiscuous, like all of the things. And she just like kind of got sucked into this or, you know, did that as well, whatever. I'm not blaming anybody. She was part of it too. And she just got engulfed in it. And I was just still kind of like, but you're my cool sister. Like, this is awesome. And you're skinny. And like, I'm not. And I told you guys, like, I felt chunky. And she was literally size 2. And I remember we looked a lot alike. And so when somebody would tell me, hey, you look like your sister, it was like the best compliment. Because I knew I viewed her so beautiful, but she never viewed herself that way. Like, she could never accept a compliment. In our town, homecoming queen was like a popularity contest. Like if you were popular, you got homecoming queen. It wasn't voted like, you know, you didn't go out and be like, vote me homecoming queen. It was literally if you were popular, you got it. Yeah. And it was her senior year. And she had, you know, she was definitely drinking heavily at this time in her life. And she was anorexic, bulimic, like all those things. And she got homecoming queen. And I still look at pictures and she was so skinny. Like her arms were like this, so tiny. And she just couldn't accept it. Like she couldn't accept the fact that people liked her. Yeah. And it broke her. And so she does this. And this would have been like late September and beginning of October. We have a house that has a basement and her room was in the basement. We have an upstairs. Mine was in the upstairs. So our main floor living, I was in the living area and I go downstairs to see her and she's sitting on the step and she's sitting on a step like this way. So like her feet are touching the wall and her back's up against the wall. And I'm like, hey, Amy, I think like time for supper or something. And nothing. She's just blankly staring at the wall. And I'm like, Amy, like, hello, like supper, like, hey, and just blank. And I touch her again and she burst into tears. Now, my sister didn't cry. I never saw my sister cry. She was tough. She held her emotions in. I never saw her cry. And she's sobbing. And I freak out because I'm like, oh my gosh. Like at this time, I would have been 11. No. She was 18. I was 13. Excuse me.
Okay.
I was 13. I was in 7th grade and I go get my dad. I'm like, Dad, something's wrong with Amy. She won't stop crying. So he goes down and he's like, Amy Joe. And she just burst in. So she's not coherent, like in her thoughts and her words. So they take her, of course, emergency room. The emergency room takes her to like a psych unit because they clearly something's wrong. Sure. I'm at home. I don't really remember much of it. They bring her home or she's there for a couple days. That's vague. Comes home and she's kind of back to normal. Like something's off, but like she was talking, she was fine. No big deal. I think just a little bit of time goes by. This happens again. So they take her into the psych unit, but this time she doesn't come back.
Okay.
And she's literally she's in a padded cell because she's throwing herself up against the wall and she has bruises from head to toe. And she's about 80 pounds, maybe, because she wouldn't eat. She
Yeah.
wouldn't eat. And she was already thin before. So a couple days like that. And yeah. And she would not be coherent in her thoughts. And she'd just bawl and sob and bawl and sob. And that was the first time that I ever saw my dad cry, because he would just hold her and he would just say,
Yeah.
like, Amy Jo, just tell us what you want. Like, and nobody could get through. And just, it was, looking back, it was her mind and her body just breaking. Like she
Yeah.
was under all this influence and all this stuff. But I'm a seventh grader and I'm looking back at this. And I love my parents and I don't blame them for 1 minute, because they had so much going on with her. My mom's still sick. Like my mom is
Hmm.
still sick, but you know, like she's taking care of this and doing this.
Sure.
But I don't remember a single person asking me how I was doing. And here it is, my best friend, like my best friend. My older two siblings are gone. My oldest brother was in the Air Force. My other sister was in college in Texas. And then my brother, he just hid inward. I mean, he didn't, like, he did what he could to like survive emotionally. He just
Sure.
kind of did that. And I remember visiting her at this facility and she was not getting better and she was getting worse and she was skinnier and skinnier. And I was like so worried about her. And so my dad, this place wasn't the best. And he
Yeah.
one day just went in, picked her up, left, walked out the door, said, we're going to figure out something else. Brought her home. We helped kind of nurse her. She would just like go crazy. She'd go naked and try to run out of the house and she'd lock herself in the room. And just, it was just like behavior that we just were not used to. And we decided to take her 3 hours away to a specialty place in a bigger town. And the whole way I had to sit in the back and rock her like a baby. That was the
Mm.
only thing that would soothe her. I would literally held her like this and just like would brush her hair, sing her songs, and that got her to the 3 hour destination. And I remember that vividly. And I look back at my daughter, who's actually older than I was, like, man, like if she would have had to do that. And I
Yeah.
just did it. I loved her. I would do anything for her, but it made me grow
Sure.
up really fast. And it made me not become the baby of the family. Because people are always like, oh, you're the baby of the family. I'm like, yeah, but it didn't really seem that way.
Yeah. Maybe chronologically, that's
Right.
about it.
It wasn't. And so, and we got there and they diagnosed her with bipolar. I still don't know if that's really what she had, but the drugs they put her on like neutralized her or whatever, made her actually be able to function as a human. A year later, she did get pregnant, so went off the drugs and she never went back on them, but she self-medicated with alcohol.
Mhm.
And from the time she had my niece until the time that she did pass away, she definitely had more good moments than bad. But I think it was probably in 2011 when she just really went downhill. Her and her husband, because I'll just fast forward a little bit, because like during
Sure.
that time, she had another child, she had two kids, she got married, like she was, living a good life, but she'd kind of go up and down. She wasn't really anorexic or bulimic anymore, but she was very aware of her body and she would drink. But she got her nursing license, and she was a phenomenal nurse, and she was like on the cross country team in college, and just all great things. And then her marriage didn't work out, and it was like ever since then it was just like, oh, I failed anyway, I'm just might as well go fail.
Mhm.
And at that time I was married and had two kids, just had my second daughter, and she was probably one of the worst times. She'd been picked up for DUI, she had to go to rehab. I can't remember if she'd lost her nursing license at this time, but I was her punching bag
Yeah.
because I was so close to her. And
Yeah.
it looked like I had everything and she had nothing,
Yeah.
because I had just had this baby and stuff. And so I kind of had to put up the walls and cut off communication because I couldn't handle the mean text. I couldn't handle, because for me, I believed it. Those
Yeah.
seeds were so deep in that relationship, because she was my best friend. I just really looked up to her. And so for her to say
Definitely.
something negative to me, it just really hurt. And so from 2011 until her passing in 2018, those 7 years, I think about that. I'm like, man, 7 years is not that long. But when I look at what we went through in that, there was so
Yeah.
much. My mom
Yeah.
passed away in 2015. When she passed away, my sister really went downhill with drinking. She missed her own daughter's graduation because she was in the hospital, like literally the day before my niece's high school graduation. We didn't know if she was going to make it. Like, it
Mm.
was by the grace of God. She went into the surgery and the surgeons are like, her body is so bad. Like, I don't even know if she'll be able to handle the anesthesia. But they fixed whatever was wrong and she was able to live another year. But, you know, the damage that she had done through drinking and whatever else, like, we don't really
Exactly.
know. But it was hard to watch. It was really, really hard to
Yeah.
watch. And, you know, I tried my best to be the sister that she needed, but I was hurt so
Yeah.
much in that time. And it was hard. It was really hard for me to help her heal.
Sure.
So that was, you know, then, but the one thing is before she passed away, we were able to mend our relationship. My older
Good.
three girls were able to know and love her. They loved her. They knew
Yeah.
that she drank, but they knew, like, Aunt Amy was like, they knew all the good stuff about her.
Yeah.
And we talk about the fact that she drank and this is why, like, we don't hide that, but like, they still
No.
have really good memories of her.
Good.
And that was really important to me. My opinion of her did not need to be their opinion of her,
No,
just that
exactly.
her behavior was not okay. And when she passed away, I was the one that was there. Well, we were all there. I was the first one called to the hospital to make a decision if they wanted to put her on the machines to keep her alive for our family to come.
Mhm.
And that moment will be etched in my brain for the rest of my life because it was like her soul was already gone and she was just like clawing at everything. And it was like she was so uncomfortable in her body and her body was like in so much pain. And I called my dad and I said, hey, Amy is in the hospital. They don't think she's going to make it. And he said, you do whatever it takes. You keep the, and he, you know, cause he's a parent and he went into
Mhm.
like survival mode and he's like, I don't care what it costs. And you send her to Omaha. I don't care, whatever it takes. And I'm sitting here crying. Like, I know nothing is going to save her at this. Like, she's
No,
gone,
exactly.
but he doesn't know that. And so I just
Yeah.
told him, I said, keep her alive until my dad gets here. Cause he was working 4 hours away. So he was going to have to, I said, keep her alive
Yeah.
for him.
Yeah.
And they were able to, they don't really know how, because they're like, her body, like, even with the machines, is
Everything's shutting down.
it's shutting down, it's gone. And the day that happened in the evening, and so the next day they kept her on machines. That day was probably one of the hardest days of my life because I sat with my dad in a room with my sister on machines and watched people come in and say goodbye to her over and over and over and over. And it was the hardest thing, but it was also the sweetest, which is so weird. And like, people will think I'm crazy, but like, I saw people love her, come and see her. And so it was like a whole like transformational thing. And, you know, and that, but like having to shut machines off to somebody you love is like, so
no, I couldn't imagine it. That's for sure.
Yeah. So that was,
all I can do is imagine it because I don't know if I could go through that. So
yeah. Yes. So that was, then I went through a lot of healing, a lot of forgiveness for myself, forgiveness. Like when my mom died too, like that was another one we had to choose to take her off machines. Fortunately, she was able to be coherent and she lasted about 24 hours. And so we were able to take her home. But I was able to say goodbye to her and tell her, like, you were an amazing mom, you know, all of those things. Because I was angry.
She was able to hear it and understand it as
right.
opposed to your sister.
Yes. And like with my sister, I was angry and I was able to forgive. And like with my mom, to just kind of pivot, I know I'm kind of going back and forth, but like with my mom,
that's fine.
The last 5 years of her life were really hard because I felt like she was giving up and I was angry at her for that. And when you have that kind of anger for somebody who's been fighting for so long, because I picture that, like my mom had been fighting for her life for like 23 years. like every day, and I just felt like she was giving up. And I was angry. And so when her passing came, I was able to be like, you are such a great mom. I'm so sorry. And having that is like an amazing gift that I got.
Sure.
Like, even though I lost her, like I had that, and I'm so grateful for that moment.
Exactly. And going back with your sister there too, for those last, say, 7 years up until she passed,
Mm-hmm.
um, you were talking about like how you were basically her punching bag for a while there,
Mm-hmm.
and you started getting upset with that. You had to cut ties now, but emotionally, not just with you yourself, but even with your family, like your husband,
Mm-hmm.
your children. How did that kind of affect your home life a bit? Only because the only reason I asked is because you two were best friends, like you said, and you worshiped her, and this is when you looked up to, and you're seeing
Yeah.
her deteriorate, not just physically, but mentally and everything. I'm sure it had to take a little bit of a toll of your own home life with your husband and your kids a little bit too.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and that's why I said in 2011 I had to put the walls up,
mhm.
because I got a text from her that was not kind. And
Yep.
I was nursing my second daughter. Like, I was literally, it was a summer day. It was beautiful. I have this newborn, I have this toddler running around. It was a great day. And I get this text, and it's some nasty thing. And I just have tears running down my eyes. And my husband came home for lunch, and he's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, show him. And he goes, "You're done. You're
Mhm.
blocking her number. You're done." Like, he was the one. Because I
Yeah.
don't know that I could have done it,
Yep.
because I longed for our relationship how it was before so
Yep.
badly. And I just felt like if I abandoned her, it'll never get back. And he looked at it and he said, "You're done, because she
Hmm.
is not adding value to you." And so I put the walls up. And then a year went by, and she went to rehab, and she came back, and she did seem like a really new person. She's like, "I'm not going to be a statistic, and I'm not going to go back to rehab." And I remember going on this walk, and I was like, she's like, "I'm going to come to Emmeline's birthday party. It was her 1 year birthday party. I'm going to bring the kids, and I'm so excited for life." And I believed it. And all the walls
Hmm.
came down. I'm like, yes, like, okay, thank you, Jesus. Like, so awesome. It was great. And we go, and I think it was like a week later, it was my daughter's first birthday, and we're setting up stuff. And I get a call from my niece, and she goes, "Can you come pick me and Jackson up for the birthday party?" And I said, "Well, isn't your mom coming?" And she goes, "Mom's passed out in the front yard."
Mm.
And instantly, all the
Yeah.
walls came up. And to be honest, until the last year of her life, they stayed up.
Yeah.
I was like, fool me once and that's it. Like, I'm done. And
Yeah.
for that reason, because I needed to be there for my niece and nephew, and I needed to be there for my kids and my husband. And we were
Hmm.
building businesses as well on the side. And I'm like, I can't have this toxic energy. And I had it anyway, because my mom at that time was going downhill as well. They both kind of went downhill at the same time. So here my mom was like giving up, taking more drugs to help her disease. And then here my sister was, and she was doing this and losing her license and all this stuff. And I'm in the middle, because I'm the only one in the area. All my siblings
Yeah.
moved away. My dad
Yep.
is traveling for work. So he's in different areas, sometimes 8 hours away, sometimes 12 hours away. So I'm in the middle of this. And then my mom and my sister's relationship was pretty toxic. So then I have to be the mediator of this. And I'm just so pissed, because I'm
Yep.
like, what the hell? Like, I'm the youngest, and I just want a good relationship. These were two people in my life that literally were like pivotal people in my life.
Yep. They were your mentors,
They're just
basically.
falling to crap. And I'm just like, what
Yep.
the hell? And so my husband has been such a pillar to my life of just putting it in perspective of like, but she's not healthy right now. Like, this is not, and I am a really strong faith. And so
Hmm.
I knew it wasn't her. It was the alcohol. I was pissed at the alcohol, and I knew
Hmm.
behind that is, for me, it's Satan, and so
Yeah.
she was not, I don't want to say she wasn't a believer. She didn't believe that Jesus loved her. So
Hmm.
she just continued to do these things. And I was like, we went to a new church with this pastor that was amazing. And she started coming.
Hmm.
And I will be forever in debt to this pastor, because he is the one, you know, Jesus's vessel was through him to
Hmm.
get her to finally see that Jesus loved her. So the last 2 to 3 years of her life, she did finally believe that. And I do believe that she wanted a better life. Her body was just so broken. And then
Hmm.
she was supposed to have a transplant, a liver transplant. And so they said, you have to change your whole diet and we have to get you ready. So you're on a list and all this stuff. So she did. She dramatically changed her diet. And the thing was, is her body was like rejuvenating. And it was,
Mhm.
even with the little liver function, they were like, I actually don't think you need a transplant, which I would think is great because just
Yep.
because you get a transplant doesn't mean anything. And it's very risky to get a transplant. So in my eyes, I'd be like, okay, what I'm doing is working. I'll just keep doing that. Her mindset was, oh, I'm not going to get a transplant, so I'm going to die anyway. So she started drinking again. Because
Okay.
in that time frame, that I think it was like 8 months, she didn't drink at all. And
Mhm.
she like went on a very holistic diet, very vegan, just like her body was healing itself and she couldn't handle it and she went back to drinking. And her body at that time had become pretty much anything, even meat that
Mhm.
she would eat would go through her body and it would almost give her a high because her
Okay.
body could not like what the liver does and stuff like that. So the end of her life, it wasn't a shock to me, but it was still a shock to me.
Yeah.
That
I know what you mean. Yeah.
so yeah, but we were
And it's
able to
funny too because you talk about that, and I can understand that because to most logical people, they would think the way you did. It's like, oh my God, I'm getting a second, third, fourth, even a fifth chance on life because now I don't need surgery. They're saying my
yep,
liver might just heal itself,
yep,
because it's one of those things that can do that.
yep,
And but most people's like, I'm going to do the best I can because now I'm getting another chance. Whereas with her mental health throughout those years from
yep,
her 20s and 30s, that's what, like you said, they think she had bipolar.
yep,
She was locked up for a while.
yeah,
That brain cells, the way it worked for her was totally different than everybody else.
yep,
So the way she looked at it, like you said, is, well, if they're not going to give me the transplant, they probably just think, you know what, why give it to somebody that's going to die anyways?
right,
We're not even going to give it to you. She probably thought it in a different way than
yeah,
everybody else, and that's why. And it's too with you, when it comes to her and your mom. It almost sounds to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it was almost like a different emotional roller coaster between the two, in a way that your mom lived her life basically fighting death the whole time, trying to stay
right,
alive, wanted to live a life. She had all these children. She had a great life. So she was living to fight death. Whereas it's almost like your sister throughout the years started fighting life. It
yeah.
is almost like the total opposite.
Right. And I think
And
she
so,
did it to like quiet the demons, to be honest, like
mhm,
quiet the negative voices. Like she just, like I said, she could never see her worth. And so the only time I think she felt free of that, now I was unable to ever ask her this, but it's just like knowing her like I do. I think the only thing was like if I drink. Like if I
mhm,
drink, I quiet the voices and I don't have to feel. Like I said, she didn't like to cry. Now, later
yeah,
on in her life, when she had her kids and stuff, like she'd cry at a drop of a hat, but like she
yeah,
still didn't like to feel emotion. And I think that's another reason when my mom passed away, she felt a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of hurt, pain. Why is mom gone? And then her and my mom did fight. Like I said, they're kind of oil and
mhm,
water. So she has the guilt and the shame. And instead of addressing that, she would just drink and then she'd feel shame for the drinking. So then she would drink because of it. And I think even when she
yeah,
was younger, that was the thing. She would do things she knew she wasn't supposed to, drink or be promiscuous or do whatever. And instead of addressing it and moving on, it was like, I'm going to drink to hide that feeling of guilt and shame. And so
sure,
whenever I'm working, like when I'd work with clients or even girls, I have 5 girls. I'm like,
yeah,
do not feel shame for anything. You can feel convicted about doing something wrong, but you will not feel shame because
mhm,
that for a woman is like, it steals your soul because
yeah.
you will do anything. It's like that embarrassment with guilt and might as well just not be here because they're better off without me. I really
Yeah,
do believe
I
she
was
felt like
thinking that in my mind. I wonder if that's kind of her
that.
mental thought, that they'd probably be better without me
Yeah.
anyways. Now, I know you can't speak for them, of course, but when it comes to your other siblings, other sister and two
Mhm.
brothers, because what I guess she had two older and two younger.
Yep. So she had an
She
older
was the middle
sister
one, you
and an
said, right?
older
Yeah.
brother, and then a younger brother and a younger sister.
Okay, so when it comes to your other brothers and sisters, and sister there, um, were they at all close with the both of you at all, or was it the type of thing growing up there where you and your sister were very close and the other one sort of just, that's why they're not around, they sort of distanced themselves and didn't want anything to do with it? Or
My older two siblings were really close. I think just because they were close in age and they were in high school together. But Amy and Angie, they were close, but they were so opposite. My oldest sister is very religious.
Okay.
And she was a very, goody two shoes. Like she
Yeah.
didn't do anything wrong, like when she was in high school. And then Amy came and did everything wrong, right? So they were
Yeah.
kind of like oil and water.
Sure.
And Angie
She was
was
the rebel.
right. And Angie was, the golden child, whatever. And then my brother, that's right below her. Well, he's actually the golden child, what we say. He's the
Okay.
favorite of the family because he was really good at sports and wrestling. And that was
Yeah.
my dad. And he was a mama's boy and stuff like that. But, but him and Amy were close. But my brother growing up, like he just didn't show emotion that way. Like, I mean, he was very loving, but like in his own kind of way. He just kind of kept to himself and his toys and like did his thing. And he had a really good group of friends. So he just would go and be with them a lot. And so he didn't see a lot of it. My oldest brother went to the Air Force because what his skill set was for the Air Force and he just did it.
Yeah.
My other sister, same thing. She wanted to be a biomedical engineer in Nebraska. That wasn't going to happen. Texas A&M was like one of the best colleges in the nation for it. So she went there. She came back a lot and we are very family centered. So like every Christmas, everything, and
Yep.
she would be there and she was definitely there, but she was the older sister, like the
Yep.
typical older sister, it was that. And then it kind of became this like not funny, but funny joke, like where me and Amy were closer and then she was like the mom, or whatever. And
Yeah.
I know it kind of hurt her feelings a little bit, but that's just the way that it was
Yeah.
because looking back on it, like I got away with everything with Amy because she was
Yeah.
like, she would take me to parties and she would do all the cool stuff and Angie would be the disciplinarian, and so
Yes.
when you're younger, you're like, I want to go with that. So we were all like close, but
Yeah.
none of them like me and her were. Dusty,
Yeah.
I would say, as far as the boys, he's the one who's just old, between me and Amy. I'd
Yep.
say he was probably the closest and like more like an adult way, like when became adults,
Sure.
she had kids and then he was like the uncle, like that type of thing. But
Yep.
nobody like how her and I were.
Yeah, exactly.
And then but I do know when Amy became an adult and had kids, like her and Angie did become very close in
Good.
that, but she still was always far away. Like
Yeah.
she always lived like North Carolina, California, Texas. Like it was never like they were right here, but they still were, pretty close in that instance. And actually when she passed away, Amy probably talked to her more than me just because of the divide that was
Sure.
there. But yeah.
Now, do you find since the passing of your mom and then in 2018 when your sister died, did it bring all of you even closer in a way that you guys talk more than before, or did it even bring all your kids together closer, like your kids with your brother's kids or sister's kids, like the cousins and stuff? Does it bring more of that family atmosphere around? Not saying that you didn't have it before, but usually tragedy does bring people together.
So when my mom passed away, I mean, like I said, it's just weird because I know everyone experiences different. So like if you've experienced this, you're going to get me. If you haven't, you're not. You're going to think I'm weird. But like when my mom's funeral happened, it was this weird emotional, like we were mourning our mom, but we had seen her suffer for a long time. So when you see somebody suffer for a really long time, it's almost this release. But it's like we were mad that she was that bad, that we wanted our mom, even when I was growing up and she was sick, like she was still an awesome mom and she was still there. She didn't go to everything, but she still went to things. You know what I mean? It wasn't like she never went or never showed up. So if I alluded to that, I apologize. But like she would go to something, and she was very nurturing and she would rub our back and she was always like our biggest cheerleader. Like my mom was like, chase your dreams. So like we missed that.
Yeah.
But the last, like I said, 4 or 5 years, we all were just kind of like, this isn't mom, And so when her funeral happened, it was like this weird release of like, we're glad she's not in pain, but like seeing my dad lose the love of his life because he was devoted to her. That was probably even harder. But like we were all together. And like I said, we all lived in different states. So like being all together, we got pictures out, we were reminiscing, like that of it was beautiful. The problem is like moms keep families together like for holidays. And so the holidays, this last Christmas was the first
Hmm.
time that everybody has been together since my mom passed away.
Okay.
Like we have been together. We did a Christmas together, semi together in Texas the
Yep.
year my sister passed away. Like it was like the Christmas after she did. We all got together in Texas. But in our hometown where they used to
Yeah.
always come back, it would have been 9 years.
Yeah.
Now we all go to weddings and we do stuff and like it wasn't like I hadn't seen them, but like all together. And my mom was really big in Christmas. So like all
Mhm.
together at Christmas time, this last Christmas was very sweet because of that
Mhm.
reason. Um, but it's weird because we don't talk a lot, but like when we talk, it's like not awkward. It's totally normal. Like we can go months without talking to each other and we
Yeah.
get like at Christmas, like, stuff happens before Christmas. We probably hadn't talked for a few months. My oldest brother, I probably hadn't talked for almost a year, honestly. And they
Yeah.
all come to my house and they stay and like we're up till midnight, 2 a.m. talking. It's not weird. It's not like, oh,
No.
we haven't talked for like, oh, what?
It's almost like that whole time hasn't passed.
Right, exactly. We don't hold grudges of like you didn't call me and why didn't you see that? Like we don't hold that in our family. We just kind of like do it. Do I wish that we did it a little bit more? Yeah, but we're all have kids and we have lives and our
Sure.
schedules don't always match. And
Yeah.
so it's fine. I'm like, if we can just get together once a year and all be together, I'm happy with that. um,
No,
and
exactly.
more for my dad's sake too, we have
Definitely.
seen loss of like our sister and our mom. I'm like, why aren't we making more of an effort of, doing one family trip a year, which we said we would move forward and work better on as far as that goes.
At
But
least you're talking and trying to do it. That means a lot right there. Now
yeah,
it's just a matter of the logistics of getting it to do
right.
work.
And like I said, we don't hold bad feelings. And I think that is a lot of families will do that. They're like, well,
Yeah.
we didn't get together every time, and why didn't you come? And we just don't do that.
Yeah.
We just get together. And I think that is a testament to how we grew up. We grew up very close. We did a lot of things. My oldest sister's kids and my kids are really close because they're close
Yeah.
in age.
Sure.
And then like we have older siblings that are like in their 20s, or nieces and nephews that are in their 20s.
Yeah.
My kids don't know them as well because of that, but
Yeah.
they still like when they get together, it's not weird, it's not awkward. Like they
Sure.
still play games together and do that kind of fun stuff. And we just don't make it awkward. Like we
No,
just
that's
do.
good.
And we talk about my sister and we
Yeah.
talk about her alcoholism. Like we don't hide it. We don't shove it under the rug or say we just don't make it weird. Like when we're together, we just choose not to make it weird and
Mm.
it's just like old times.
No, definitely. Now, when it comes to you and Amy's children,
Mhm.
or not just you, but also your children, your dad,
Yep.
and your other siblings, are you guys still very close
Yes.
with them and talk to them on a regular basis, or as much as you can, of course?
Yeah. We,
Because I think you said they were divorced by that time,
yep.
so I don't know if you guys are close with the father
Yep.
still or not, but
Yeah, so her ex-husband I invited to Christmas, like he's still welcome in our house, and has been even through the divorce. I mean, they both were in the wrong for the divorce, and so it's kind
Mhm.
of like, it is what it is. But no, her daughter and her son, like we help plan the wedding for her daughter, we help with the graduations for her daughter and her son, and they come to Christmas. And like I said, we're none of us are real great about calling each other. I have 5 kids. I talk for a living. So when I get home, sometimes I'm like, and she's a PA. She just got her PA, and my niece, and she has the most beautiful voice. I want her to be on The Voice so bad because she's so talented. But she just became a PA and she's married, and they live in Wichita, Kansas. And so, yeah, we love them. They're always like, especially like my dad, like they're in my dad's heart because, everything. And we love them like they're our own, and I would do
That's
anything
awesome.
for them. So yeah, very close.
That's good because I know stuff like this happens and then people just fade away from each other. And um, I'm glad too that you were able to patch things up with your sister before it happened, because
Yeah.
there's so many people that don't get that chance to do that
Yeah.
and they regret it later on.
Yeah.
I also know what you were talking about a bit with when you're with your mom and stuff, because my dad passed away back in 2013, and we were kind of wondering, like, we were surprised it lasted so long because
Yeah.
my dad was a very heavy smoker
Uh-huh.
and always coughing, almost like you think he's like choking and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And near the end there, it was a type where he was like not even eating properly and or at all. And I remember the last time I saw him face to face, I gave him a big hug when we were leaving, and I shook his hand. It's the type of thing where you hug and shake at the same
Yep.
time. And I could feel like every bone in his hand, and you knew that he was really frail.
Yes.
But we had thought like 5-10 years before that, like with his smoking, everything, that he would have lost him earlier.
Yeah.
But it's still not the same. We knew that, okay, this was coming, and you kind of prepare yourself for it,
Yeah.
but you're still never prepared no matter
No.
what you do.
No.
And I even remember my brother saying, like, when they told me what happened and that he passed away, and they even said, well, the funeral's on this date. He's going to be going cremated. Do you want to come and see him, like his body before? And I'm like, I remember how he was when I saw him. He was smiling. I'd rather remember him that way than
Yeah.
seeing him the way he was there. And so I know exactly what you were talking about when you said, only if you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
you'll understand. So I kind of knew what you were talking about. So I'm so happy to see that your family's still very close. And I think the one thing I love about this show, compared to some of the other episodes where we talk about stuff like this, is most of the shows I've done has all been the person I'm talking to is the one that had the alcoholism, or they had the Lyme's disease, like that had the trauma that we were talking about. In your case, and I've had one other one like this, people don't understand how it affects when somebody else is going through it and how it affects the rest of the family.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to bring you on here, not just to hear what's happening to you, but what your feelings were, or what happened with your life because of this happening in your family, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, yeah. And I
People
think
don't always look at the other side.
right. And I think you look at that good and bad too. Cause like when I was growing up, when I was a seventh grader, like I knew because of what I went through, especially with my sister, I wanted to know about human behavior. So like I wanted to know why people did what they did. Like, and I've always had that hunger forever, and I think that attests to this. It also, like I said, put seeds of insecurity of body image and how I should act and what I should do. And, even with drinking, cause like I don't drink now, but I drank before, and I drank probably when I shouldn't have because of that role model and those seeds. And like, and I love my parents. They did like what they could do at the time, but they really shouldn't have let me hang out with her because she was not a good role model, And like, I think they just thought, oh no, they're spending time together. Yeah. She was taking me to parties. I was drinking beer at like a freshman of high school. Like that's dumb. That's just not smart, like it's those things. But, but because of that, like I am so on my girls about being good role models. I'm like, everything you do affects your sisters, like good, bad, or otherwise. You can be mad about it or not, but it matters and they care about you and you have that relationship and they can be your best friend or your worst enemy. Like that's your choice. And so, it's also set me up to be a better mom to these girls to build a relationship. And I'm not saying they're going to be perfect and I'm not expecting them to be, but they get the choice and and I have different eyes. Like when my youngest sees my oldest do something, I'm like, see, she's mimicking you. Like she wants to be like you. She wants to do this. And one thing I know from working with alcoholics or addicts of any sort is they're very me-centered and they don't mean to be, because actually they don't want to be, because they don't like who they are, but that's all they're focused on. And like with my sister, it was like she couldn't handle other people liking her, instead of turning it around and being like, you know what? I am a skilled nurse. I do have these kids. I do have a blessed life. How can I give it back? How can I serve other people? It was like, poor me, look at me. This is that. I did this wrong, da, da, da. It's all the I centered. When you can get anybody who has any sort of that, like, what do you say, addiction or not? I'm not an addiction specialist, but I've worked with people to know when you can get them to shift from I to like you or we, or how can I serve in a different manner? Because when Amy would serve, when she was in her nursing mojo, when she was, and endorphins too, like she needed that natural high, whatever chemical, I do think she had chemical imbalances going on. When she would run, it would balance those out, which is a lot of people. So it's like, if you can just get those people to like get the natural high of the endorphins, the serotonin, all of those dopamines and stuff naturally rather than like always turning to something else, that also helps. And, seeing those shifts and things like that. But never once did I ever feel like a victim of it. There were moments of me just being pissed of like, why can't I have a healthy mom? Why can't my sister see her worth? Because we were so close. And I think I hold tight to those memories that we had together that were so amazing. But I'm also so grateful for those amazing memories because a lot of people don't even have those. So
No,
yes, I
exactly.
have the messy ones, but I also have the miraculous ones.
Yeah.
And it's really easy if you love an addict to focus on the messy ones. And then when they die, it's like you feel all this guilt and shame. It's like just hold on to the really good ones and be glad. And I'll kind of leave on this note, but like I was able to give her eulogy, which was at both my mom and my sister's, which was a God thing because I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And then they did a song and it's Go Rest High on the Mountain.
Yep.
And when you listen to the words of the song, it was my sister's life. Like I still to this day can't get through that song without crying because it was like she tried to fight the devil. And even though she was 30, I'm the age she was when she passed away.
Yeah.
And it was 5 years ago. And so she fought this devil for 20 or 14. What's the math? I can't.
Yeah, I know. It's probably like
20
years,
yeah,
20 years.
24 years that she fought the devil. And finally she's at peace. And that's what gives me peace. And still hard. There's still moments that bring me to tears. And I love her and I can hear her voice in my head, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But, I wouldn't change it because it's made me who I am. And I can sit and I can recognize my good. And I can say, okay, like I'm not going to be hard on myself like she was because look what happened.
Exactly.
That brewed nothing but bad. So like every time I'm hard on myself or say, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not this, I'm like, no, no, you are. Like this is, that. And that's a testament to her. And so I'm grateful for that.
No, I'm glad. I think that's great words to end on because normally I ask, do you have any last words you'd like to say to her? I think you just summed it up right there perfectly because instead of going back and just thinking of all the bad times and the negative times, think of all the good and positive times because I'm sure you had tons of that because you were best friends and you enjoyed yourself with her and that. So I'm happy that you can think of that way. And I think other people need to do that too. So I want to appreciate you for coming on here. I know this wasn't easy for you to come on and spread all that out to everybody, but I think it is, even if we can help one person, I always say that it makes the show worth it. So
thank you for having me.
I hope everybody, no, thank you. And I hope everybody will not only watch this, maybe watch it again and maybe share this with a lot of your family and friends. Cause I'm sure there's other people out there that are going through this that maybe need to hear what you had to go through. And I think you are an amazing guest here. And I appreciate you coming on and being so vulnerable like that. But hopefully we can maybe in a little while, maybe in about a year or so when we start going back to some of our old episodes, we'll bring you back on and we'll check in on you. I want to do maybe a reunion show and have people check in and see how people are doing and stuff. So, and do you have anything that you would like to plug? Do you have any books coming out or anything?
No, you can just, I mean, I have a podcast called What Went Wrong, the untold stories of bouncing back from failure. So definitely check that out. I'm sure you'll put links in this, but I have a website, tabthorell.com or Tabs Trainings. That's all my free resources for wealth, family, business, fitness, anything I've done in the last 16 years for my businesses, I put up there. And like me on Instagram, review the podcast. Let me know what you think.
Definitely. And we'll definitely put all the links in there for everybody to go check it out. And I guarantee you should go check it out.
All right.
Again, thank you very much. And remember, everybody, we'll be back here again next time with somebody else. And until then, remember, if anybody asks, say the Butler did it.
All right.